Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody tuning in today for another Supatease PvP walkthrough. And in this one specifically, I will be going through my thoughts as a Restoration Druid against a Arms Warrior Enhancement Shaman team. Healing, in particular, a Shadow Priest Warlock, as this is one of the most difficult compositions to heal against, and I think that my insight in this match is going to be very useful for you to use yourself in your own gameplay, as these melee classes do high intensity single target burst, which is the perfect counter against our wizardy composition with two spellcasters who are quite squishy wearing their cloth armor. As a tip against this team, I run Focused Growth, Revitalize, and Thorns. I find it far too risky to look for Cyclones in particular, especially if you're playing with two ranged classes. I like to just stay very far back and away from the fight. You can opt for Nourish, however it's a bit riskier as you can be interrupted on it quite easily. What it comes down to against this composition fundamentally is your rotation of defensive cooldowns. That includes primarily Ironbark, Dispersion, Life Swap, Greater Fade, and Demonic Gateway. At the start of the game, you want to charge across and crowd control any of them moving in to stop your Warlock, as he needs to set up that Demonic Gateway for an escape. Early on, since I used my Trinket, I pair that with Ironbark to slow down the initial damage on my Shadow Priest. And as you can see, even with using Ironbark as maybe my second ability in this game, he is still taking a lot of damage. I then pair towards the end of the Ironbark with Thorns. When Ironbark ends, I tell my Shadow Priest to then use Gateway. Why? Because the warrior has Avatar currently active and it's up for another 7 more seconds. That increases the Arms Warrior's damage quite heavily, and it's better to just escape to safety. Using the Demonic Gateway when the Mistweaver uses Way of the Crane is also when you really want to use that Way of the Crane. So during this downtime, while I'm waiting for the next crowd control to hit me, I'm notifying my priest that I have no Ironbark and it's likely to be Dispersion used next. I set my priest up for the most amount of HPS. I have a mushroom on the ground healing him, maximum hots, and as he dips lower, I then tell him to actually use Void Shift, because his health at that low may have not been enough with Dispersion and Sharpened Blade, reducing the amount of healing that it would have done. So instead, I use Void Shift, as that's a, oh my goodness, you're going to die if you don't press this right now button, but you would like to use that as a last line. Then immediately after, I use Ironbark, almost immediately off of its cooldown, because their damage is just so insanely high. I try to toss some hots on myself just in case they switch, but the damage has subsided a bit and I still have Ironbark, so I move in to try and make an aggressive play on the Mistweaver with a bash. And you can see all the time that I've spent trying to make this aggressive push has now cost my priest a Dispersion. The main win condition for us against this team is to run the Mistweaver out of mana. So pushing forward for an aggressive play like that and leaving yourself open to a defensive cooldown overlap is not something that you want to look to do. Instead, just focus on defense, focus on surviving. Try and let the person who isn't being attacked do more of the setup and more of the carry. So my Warlock in this case, you could see he was setting up a lot of burst damage on the Monk. He's really the playmaker because no one's going after him. Now I tell my Shadow Priest to move towards the edge, because we have abilities such as Mind Control to try and pull the enemies off the side of this ledge and away to safety. As soon as I come out of crowd control, I almost immediately use Ironbark, and then I tell my Shadow Priest to move to the Demonic Gateway because we have it available. And I'm looking for either crowd control on myself or Way of the Crane from the Mistweaver, and those are the two situations that you want your partner to use that gateway to get to safety. In the meantime, you're just maxing out your health per second. You're almost preemptively healing the damage. You should be casting Regrowth even if the priest is already at full health, because by the time you finish the cast, they are most certainly not going to still be at full health. Then when I get crowd controlled, I tell my Shadow Priest to move to the gateway and get ready to retreat to safety. And you can see he runs. So there's Avatar, that 12 seconds left where the warriors frame. And I try to crowd control the Shaman with a bash Entangling Roots to delay his time getting back to the Shadow Priest and really minimize this cooldown increase that they've got active at this point. I use Vortex to hold the Shaman in place and look for a bursty setup on him. And like I said, the Warlock is the playmaker. He's setting up interrupts on the Mistweaver, setting up bursts to try and end the game. game. Meanwhile, you and your Shadow Priest, your main goal is surviving, occasionally throwing in a crowd control when you can, but your main focus should be on surviving. Here you don't want to use Iron Bark. Well, why? Because the Shaman's hiding behind the pillar, not hitting your Shadow Priest, and the Warrior's basically dead. So you don't need to use a cooldown in this position. You've really got to pay attention to when they're connecting to the target or not. But if they're both connecting, it's likely that you're going to have to press that Iron Bark basically on cooldown. But you want to rotate it with the Dispersion, with the Demonic Gateway, during moments when you're crowd controlled or when the enemies have aggressive cooldowns active. I hope that this guide is useful to you in your endeavors in the arena on Restoration Druid in patch 8.1. Thank you very much for tuning in. Please consider subscribing to the channel and hitting that notification bell because I'm creating videos every single day. So if you want to try and take away any information that I've got, this is the place to be. You're going to get exactly what you need. I'm leveling up every class. I have big aspirations to do guides on every spec at some point in the expansion. So eventually I'm going to hit yours for sure. But if I don't, I definitely try to give insight on other specs just from a different perspective, and it's still useful to you. If you have any feedback or you have any suggestions on guides that you would like to see, please leave those in the comments below. I always read them. I always respond. I appreciate all of your input because at the end of the day, I'm making these guides to help everybody else try and improve their game because I want to see everyone's game level up so we can have insane competition moving into 2019. But until then, until the next video, I'm going to be signing off here. Thank you very much, and I will see you later.